Welcome to the AI Applied podcast. Today on the show, we have the man, the myth, and the legend, Logan Kilpatrick, member of technical staff over at Google. Probably our most frequent guest. We've had him on the most repeat times because he has absolute gems. Google just came off of Google I/O, so phenomenal stuff launched there. You're just telling us about it behind the scenes, what it kind of looked like. But I would just love to kick this over to you and say, like, from everything launched at Google I/O, everything you guys are working on, what are maybe what's what's the thing you're most excited about personally?
That's a great question. It's tough. It's tough to pick favorites, but probably Gemini Omni is like the thing that there's sort of there's two big things happening in parallel, and I'll just give you this one. But like Omni is sort of the consolidation of all these different gen media models that we have. So folks know Nano Banana, folks know VO, which we announced VO3 last year at I/O with sort of native audio output generation capability. Omni is the fusion of all of our different gen media models along with Gemini, that creates it actually like creates a world model,
Okay.
which is really, really interesting. And you can do all these cool things. And what I've been telling everyone who I've been sort of chatting with and doing content with is for your video watchers, not the audio listeners, unfortunately, you should do something crazy in the intro using Omni. And what's
Okay.
the model didn't click for me until I did this use case, which was like someone took a picture actually as I was on stage, sort of with a panel of other folks, and the coherent conversation continues. We continue talking about the same thing, except the little dog comes walking across the stage, jumps up onto my lap. I'm sort of petting the dog. One of the other panelists laughs, and they look over at the dog. The content is exactly the same though. We keep talking about AI. We're doing all this stuff, and it's just these like really subtle video edits that you can pull off
Cool.
with Omni. And happy to go deep dive on it, but it's super exciting.
Okay, wait, I
Yeah,
want to double click on that
yeah,
just
go ahead, Jim.
because this is so fascinating, and like I can think of 100 people that are really stoked about this. So it's like for video, I mean, Omni's like a whole bunch of things. What makes it better for video in particular versus like something like Suno or VO that we've seen kind of traditionally with video models? Some are good, some aren't as good. Like, how does putting it all together make that better?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, um, putting it all together is actually really hard from a technical perspective. So there's this like notion of like positive capability transfer, like what happens when you stick all these different capabilities into a single model. And actually, what ends up happening is like as one thing gets better, and this is not specific to like video generation, image generation, as you make one thing better, it actually often comes at a cost of something else.
Mm.
Uh, and so I think what's happened with the first like version of Omni is literally like the first like truly like the V0 iteration of Omni. It's the Flash version of it, so things are going to get much better. But the first version, the sort of capability that has the most positive capability transfer, is you bring together like every image or every input modality and every output modality together into a single model. The use case that's shining the most right now, is video editing capabilities. So
Hmm.
I think it's partially by design. I think they also wanted to focus on that use case to begin with.
Okay.
And like technically the model can actually output text and output images and output audio as well. But we're really focused initially on this sort of video editing use case. And so I
So
think it
cool.
shines. And I think it's also state of the art. It's definitely better at like pure video generation than VO is. I don't know if it's like purely state of the art for like text to video generation yet. But the editing use case is unparalleled. It's like Nano Banana for video is the tagline.
Wow.
Yeah, the Nano Banana for videos is what I've seen too, and yeah, Logan, so good to have you on, and I know you're super busy, and you're always just like so generous with your time here. Like, with it's funny that you say that though, as you're sort of talking, because we could go in a million directions, and we'd love to hear more about like the other things you're excited about, because I think people sort of like see this like sometimes it feels like a laundry list of like, oh my gosh, like all these things, but like what are the things that are going to impact me, and you and I first met through our friend Allie Miller, and she called me like right like from there. She's like, the one nobody's talking about is, and I don't want to steal her thunder on that, but it's like, but it was cool. She's like, no, that's the really big one. But I love what you said about this kind of consolidation of world models. When Gemini was coming up, the huge lead up to Gemini, and everybody knew Gemini, the original Gemini I'm talking about, and everybody knew that it would be powerful and everything like that. But the big thing was it was going to sort of like incorporate, natively all these models rather than sort of like being tacked on and things like that. And I wonder sort of like how you guys think about it, because you guys do talk a lot about like, world models and consolidation. So for I'm just sort of thinking like, are you kind of like looking at how all these things come together? Because right now you have so many things out there, and this is the first time obviously we're talking about all this, but it was interesting. Obviously, Omni maybe in the name, but is that how Omni kind of got its name? And is this where you're sort of like going with all this?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely, and I think there's many reasons and layers to like why. I mean, I'll give you a couple of obvious ones. Like, it would be really nice and useful for our customers to not have to think about seven different models as they sort of explore the ecosystem. Hey, it'd actually be great for Google to not have to train nine different models in order to do a
Right.
bunch of this
Yeah.
stuff. The developer ecosystem, as you sort of integrate these models into like suites of creative tools, like today we have bespoke tools for audio and video and image and a bunch of other stuff. And, if we could do all that in a single thing, it would be great for the developer ecosystem to not have to go and sort of use all those different things. All the capability transfer. Ideally, you would want sort of there's a bunch of really interesting things that you can only do when you actually bring these things together natively into a single model. And so I'm super excited. And I think this has actually been the intent and the direction, to your point, Connor, from day one. It takes it's a lot of hard work. It's actually like not, there's like a lot of research that has to happen in order to make this possible. And I think so we're very much like on a research timeline in order to like merge all these capabilities into a single model, make sure they all end up being like really powerful and state of the art. But I think that's the direction that folks are trying to go, and I think you'll see us continue to push on this Omni direction. And then I think there's a separate thread around this too, from like which we can. One of my favorite like conversation starters at this year's IO was asking folks across Google, sort of in a slightly different vein of what you were saying, Connor, but like, you know, with everything that's happening, 5 years from now, does Google have 10,000 products or does Google have three products? And sort of there's this whole like super app product push that's happening as well, which I think is also related to what you're saying with Google has so much stuff in the ecosystem. So lots of interesting.
Okay, Logan, we actually have to get into that. I'm glad you brought it up because I think a lot of people have been talking about this. It was on TBPN. Nathan Clark kind of went viral for it on Twitter, but he had this kind of joke post, which was like, there's all these different Google products. There's all these different Gemini products. Some people are a little bit confused about where to get Flow versus VO and Nano Banana and all the different places. It sounds like there's kind of a consolidation happening. I know he's kind of joking here, but for people that are, they see so much in the Google ecosystem, but they're trying to figure out the best way to think about it. How is Google thinking about all of these different products and how everything works together?
Yeah, I love this suite, not because AI Studio's in the first line, but because well, I think there's like two dimensions to this. Like, obviously Google has lots of products. You I think it's somewhat tongue in cheek. The average user is not exposed to sort of the breadth of these things. I think the user persona who's being sort of identified here, who would actually like reasonably be seeing some amount of these things, like is definitely like the much more advanced. You're sort of like in the AI bubble. You're sort of like seeing all these things. The random person who's just using Google search or whatever in the Google Workspace suite like isn't seeing most of these tools.
Yeah.
There's a separate thread of this as well, which is like in the moment of the platform shift, and this is actually not unique to Google. In the moment of the platform shift, you want to be taking as many bets as humanly possible.
Mhm.
So I think like Google's responsibility and our obligation to our customers and to the ecosystem and to the world as sort of like a company with a bunch of resources is like, go do a bunch of innovation, go explore a bunch of things, go find out what's going to work and what's not going to work. And so I still feel like we are like firmly in that moment of the platform shift is happening. We don't yet know what the future is going to look like. We should be sort of innovating and exploring as many things as possible. Oftentimes that does mean in practice you like make a new surface in some cases, because like you want to be able to give people a totally different experience that like maybe wouldn't map to one of the existing product surfaces,
Right.
especially if it's one of the like larger product surfaces. But I think the flavor of truth to this story is like we need to tell a coherent story to folks. And there actually are things we can do from a product perspective that sort of weave these products together in a much more coherent way. And I think like two examples of this, the like Google subscription, sort of like the Google AI subscription is now what it's called, sort of is this sort of conduit in a lot of cases to a lot of these different products. So you sort of like have a through line as a user. You can use this same subscription across all of Google's new product suites that are doing AI tools, et cetera, et cetera. Another one is like, I've been kicking around a bunch of ideas, and you actually see this like very subtly in AI Studio, but there in the top left-hand corner, there's like literally a small little drop down, and it has a bunch of the other products that are from DeepMind. And it's a smaller list. Cool. It's only anti-gravity in the Gemini app. But you can imagine sort of similar to what Workspace has done, where you sort of click that like top right-hand corner, you can see the other Workspace products. Like you can imagine we do that for our AI suite of tools. So I'm trying to push on that because I think it would just be helpful to users to like be able to seamlessly move between all these different products. And I personally want to continue to see Google innovate and like ship a bunch of new stuff. And I think, again, it means we will maybe have more products to talk about.
Okay.
Okay. But hold on. Let me ask on that because, like, okay, wait. Jaden has a hot take follow. Go on.
I just one last thing to follow up on this because I love that. I just also wanted to say it's so funny when I see all of these comments directed at Google.
Yeah.
The top comment is always like at official Logan KP or Logan K. Like, have you become the default like customer support person for all of Google? Why does everybody tag you?
Logan, solve this.
I love being a customer support agent. I think it is an extremely gratifying job, and it also makes everything I do easier because I am sort of plugged into what people are saying. Yeah. So I appreciate it. Feel free to keep tagging me on all these threads.
Yeah, it's true. It really is like Logan. The like I just imagine him like an old school, like answering a phone. You know what I mean? Like being like, "Hello, this is Google." But okay, here's my hot take on this, and this is I'm sure this is not what you're going for here, but it's funny, like one of the things that I think we've all talked about a lot in the past, and certainly like we talk about a lot, is that like there's still people who don't know that all these tools are out there, right? And I think one of the challenges when ChatGPT and Logan was sort of famously at OpenAI before. He was at Google, and one of the challenges with ChatGPT that we saw very early on when we were trying to like help companies and stuff like that, it's not like we would call it like the blank box problem. It's just like, hey, so what should I use this for? And people are like, anything. And people are like, well, like what? Like, and you're like, no, anything. It's like, well, is it more like recipes or more like physics homework? You're like, yeah, but so, and the problem that we started to realize was that that's just not how like the brain works, right? I mean, like ChatGPT would have been better off almost early on to be like, this is called recipe maker, and this is negotiation tool, and this is physics homework, all going to the same model on the back end. But the thing that I actually like about this that I knew, people were sort of like making fun of, and everybody who's making fun of it is in the AI bubble. It's like, oh my gosh, Google has 50,000 products. And I'm like, you're not seeing what humans see because that's not what billions of people see. Like they just have their thing. Like they 6 months ago, they discovered VO, and they're like, this is amazing. And then, however long ago they discovered Nano Banana, like they're like, this is a bit, I don't think people are clamoring outside the bubble, which is 99% of the people. I'm not sure people are clamoring for one consolidated model. So I'm not sure that I don't think, Google's necessarily driving at this, but I actually really appreciate the deliberate approach to this because Google has a higher standard that they're held to. I mean, like everybody's still talking about like the glue on pizza and eating rocks. I'm like, holy crap! Like that was like one thing that one person screenshotted in the early days of AI overviews, and that's it because you're Google. Like that's the blessing and the curse. But I would sort of like almost say from the outside that keeping these things separate and letting people get accustomed to being able to change up a video in, and I was testing out Omni. It's amazing, but now the people who are accustomed to that, like, okay, now let's kind of dip their toe into this. And people are just doing search. Let's dip their toe into AI overviews. Do you know what I mean? And like letting people find their way. I don't think that the world is clamoring for this one model right now.
So, Connor, do you think it's going to be 10,000 products or 3 products?
I think that it's
5 years.
I think in 5 years, I think we're going to be close. Maybe we'll get closer to 3, but I think that all this is slower than 5 is the toughest one. If you had said like in 2 years, I would have said 10,000. 5 years, I think we'd be getting there. But I actually do think it's going to take that long.
Yeah.
Okay. Logan, you've been talking about on LinkedIn that Google AI Studio, it's going to be coming to mobile, Android, and iOS. It's actually interesting because there's been a bunch of drama. I know this doesn't really have anything to do with you, but like with Apple basically kicking off anything, I think the app, it was kind of like a vibe coding app, and there's a bunch of other competitors that have had some drama, and there's interesting ways they got to go about doing things. So for people that are like interesting, like, okay, sweet, Google AI Studio is going to be on mobile, what does that experience look like? What are you able to build? What are some of the limitations? It's exciting, but I know there's just been a bunch of kind of stuff going on in tech with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been interesting to fall also just like as somebody who's been trying to understand, we're trying to build an iOS app that we've been working on for a while now and bring it to folks. Um, it seems like there's definitely like very specific requirements from Apple around this, and they're trying to do what Apple does, which is keep the platform safe and all that
Sure.
stuff. Um, the thing that I've been most excited about, and we've been spending a lot of time thinking about sort of what do we do for this like next gen AI builder. We sort of have AI Studio, the most successful users of AI Studio in a lot of cases are traditional developers. They're building a startup, they're working on a side project, they're using the API, they're getting their API key, they're testing all the models, etc. And we've sort of like done that very successfully. There's now, I think soon I'll show those numbers on screen. There's like 8.5 million developers monthly using AI Studio, the API, and anti-gravity, which is incredible. And so the question has been like, we know that things are changing. We know that we want to sort of go to this next generation of builders. There's potentially hundreds of millions of these people. How do we do that? And I think we sort of went and thought about 50 different things and sort of maybe even kicked off in a bunch of those different directions. And then I think sort of came back to like, we should do this on mobile, and mobile should be the place where like, and actually in a lot of countries and a lot of geographies, like people don't even have laptops yet. Like I think we're like so, we're talking about like early in the AI era. Like we're early in still like the internet still
Yep.
in a lot of ways, which is like a crazy reminder of just like how far technology has to go to sort of penetrate into society. And so the intentional direction is like we want to meet this next gen builder audience directly on mobile. We want you to be able to like this tagline, and sort of we'll have an amazing commercial coming out when the app launches. But this sort of idea, this notion that everybody has an idea. If you sort of like look across the world, everyone has had an idea before, and they're like, I want to build that thing. The problem lies in that like you can't actually build. Historically, you would need a team, you would need resources, you would need all these things. And so we're building the AI Studio mobile experience so that like in the moment that you have that idea, you can actually bring that idea to life. You can share it with your friends, you can share it with the world, you can sort of do all these things that you want to do. And I'm super excited. So it'll look a lot like the existing AI Studio vibe coding experience, layered in with a bunch of things to like help capture your idea. Because oftentimes actually you're like, and this is for me, and I'm sure if you all have had ideas before, it's the same thing. Like I don't immediately go to a tool and start building something. Sometimes
Right.
I often like write it down somewhere and I spend a little bit more time thinking about it. And so how can we bring things like that into this mobile experience so that it's not just a place that you go fire off into a chat box and sort of, look at an output, but actually help sort of scaffold the idea and bring things to life in that way. So I'm very excited. It's coming on iOS, it's coming on Android. And the early traction has been super cool to see already.
One more thing on that, and then I really want to hear sort of like other things too, because like there's so many things that came out. We could go in a million directions. Uh, on that though, like you sort of like bend more developer. Obviously, sort of like you've had a lot of relations with developers. You think about developers, and I mean, obviously, famously with AI, we can kind of turn any person into a developer, but it's obviously a very different mindset between somebody who has no idea like what it means to build an app, and AI Studio, I think I find AI Studio extremely appealing, just because once you start getting in there, and I tell people this all the time too. It's like, or AI Studio Live, it's like just open it, just open the thing and just sort of see what it looks like, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, do you want to bring in Google Maps? And it starts introducing elements that people already are familiar with, which I think is really cool. But when you think about your thoughts on this and Google's positioning on this, you have obviously like enterprise, you have developer, you have consumer. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap there. Do you have a sense of like how to drive the evolution of the consumer on this? Because it feels like at this moment, Google has now owned consumer. And I think that with, and I no shade to OpenAI or anything like that, but it just feels like Google's gaining steam on this, and we know that Anthropic has been leading into enterprise for a long time. Obviously, Google has tons of enterprises too. But when you think about the consumer experience, are you guys like focused on that as well, and like what it means to sort of like start overlapping those things more and more, developer and consumer and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the app is the manifestation of that, and I think it's I would frame it not necessarily as consumer. I would frame it as like we're building for this builder audience. Like I do fundamentally think like at the end of this next 5 years, we're going to have hundreds of millions of people who are sort of developers. They're doing exactly the same thing that a developer was doing 5 years ago. It looks
Mhm.
slightly different. Maybe the level of abstraction is slightly different, but like, and maybe they actually don't self-identify as a developer, but they're doing developer work. And so I think that the interesting thread of this is that I think and this is why we wanted to tackle this problem. I think there's lots of teams at Google who have lots of actually there's lots of teams at Google who have like much more consumer experience even than our team does. And there's folks who have built search and 50 other things that are much more successful consumer products than we'll ever build. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that the the this next gen AI builder and the traditional developer, if you sort of look under the hood of what these folks need, it's actually the same sort of substrate of things. These folks need compute. These folks need to deploy stuff. These folks need to be able to distribute the thing that they build. These folks need, a bunch of other services and security stuff and privacy things. And maybe they want to add ads to sort of monetize or to sort of, help users find their thing. They want to, et cetera, et cetera. Like the needs are actually really, really similar. And I think that's why we want to sort of solve this in AI Studio, and with an existing developer audience as well as this next gen developer audience that we're sort of going after. So we'll see if that ends up working, but that's the direction that we're chugging in.
That's
Love it.
awesome.
Okay, two things. First of all, I absolutely love the logo for Google AI Studio. I'm a sucker for symmetrical shapes. Your design
Oh
team
yeah, very cool.
absolutely cracked. Beautiful logo. Um, in a more important thread, you were recently posting on LinkedIn and you were talking about the Google search box. I think this is something that everybody is getting is interfacing with, billions of people in the world. We saw your most recent numbers. I think it's like a billion monthly active users on Google AI mode, right? Something like
Yeah.
that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Tell
Yeah.
me about this. You said this is the quote biggest upgrade to Google search box in 25 years. Is this hyperbole? Is this real? Tell people what they can expect here with this new feature.
Yeah, I think this is like a very natural evolution for search. And obviously, I'm not on the search team, but I'm a fan and I'm a user.
Yeah.
And Robbie Stein and the team and Liz are doing an incredible job of sort of what I sort of always frame as this like important stewardship position that they have in sort of the era of the front door of the internet. I think what's happened naturally for search is that the literally like what people are asking has changed. People are now asking like deeply multimodal questions. People are now asking questions that like they want to bring their context in because they have some file or whatever it is, an image, a video, and they want to bring that into search. People are asking like much longer questions, multi-part questions, more complicated questions. And so I think search has gone from sort of this like keyword based approach to maybe a little bit more advanced than keyword to now like kind of looks like the way people are asking questions on a bunch of these other services. And so I think search has done an incredible job. I think a year and a half ago, I sat down with Robbie Stein and he made the
Mhm.
comment to me, who I don't know if y'all have ever had on before. I talked to Robbie.
Yeah.
Robbie's incredible.
Yeah, he's the
And
man.
somebody who I love talking with because he's just like so plugged in and locked in all this stuff. And he made the comment to me that like the bar for search is to be a frontier AI experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually like super incredible to see. I think people have this notion that like search is slow or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think search
Yeah.
actually is like they shipped Gemini 3.5 Flash the same day that the rest of Google did, except to literally every
Yeah.
single user in the world.
The
And I
planet,
think
right?
it makes you appreciate like how quickly they're moving. And I think the other thing that they announced was also this sort of like agentic future for search as well. And I think again, this goes to just like the way that people are asking for things is changing. Like people are actually asking, potentially like go do this thing for me. And so search, I think like should be a place where you can actually have that happen. And so they're going to pull in the anti-gravity harness. and you sort of like do a bunch of agentic work directly inside of search in the future, which is super exciting. So
It's
lots of
it's
yeah.
it's so no, it's so cool. It's the and this is sort of like what you were kind of getting at before, I think, which is this like this like it's almost like an invisible consolidation, right? I mean, like it's consolidation without telling people you're consolidating. They're just getting a better feature in front of them. I don't know if we've had Robbie on. I've gotten to interview Robbie a couple of times. One of the big things I was always asking Robbie about, who again like runs searches, the really fascinating thing is memory for me, right? It's sort of like, how does this thing actually get to know you? Like, how does Google search get to know you? Because like I'll be sort of searching for something totally random for my, a friend of a friend or a kid. And then like I don't want Google search being like, I guess he's like really into, this thing, which I was asking Robbie about because I think it's fascinating. But that kind of like leads us into, Spark and the agents. And I wonder if you can kind of talk about that because Jaden and I talk about agents a lot, and like, and last weekend, Logan, I remember a while ago, you kind of joked that the Mac Minis were sort of like, selling out super fast. So I went ahead, got that like days before I went on OpenClaw, like, did all that for the first time myself because I'm not a builder. And it was fascinating how easy it is, and it's fascinating how addictive it is if you just kind of get over that hump. And now with Spark, I'm wondering if you can kind of give people who don't, they're still like, I understand what agents are, but I don't know what it feels like. Can you give a sense of like what Spark is and what it should feel like?
Yeah, and actually, Connor, I'm super curious. Like my reflection on OpenClaw is that obviously Peter and the team have done an incredible job and built like a really, really cool open source project. But as I sort of onboarded to become an OpenClaw user, I was I was actually very surprised to the level of hype that OpenClaw had gotten relative to like the amount of friction in that product experience. Like I think it's actually
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to be somewhat blunt, like I think it's like if you're not sophisticated from a developer perspective, from an AI perspective, I think it's a pretty terrible product experience actually. Like it requires a lot of like weird, crazy stuff. Just there's like 90 pages of settings and all this like really complicated things that you have to figure out. And like I mean, I'm a software engineer by trade. I'm like, I was
Yeah.
overwhelmed opening this thing
Yeah.
up. And I was like, of course the average user is going to be way more overwhelmed and never go down this route. Um, and so I think Project Spark sort of Gemini Spark was sort of is an attempt to bring a lot of the things that came from OpenClaw and sort of other actually the Gemini app has an agent mode since I think last year is the attempt to bring sort of an always on 24/7 agent to everyone. And so I think it starts with a small set of testers this week, and then actually is rolling out to Ultra subscribers next week, which is really exciting. And sort of the way to think about this is like you can throw work over your shoulder through Spark, and the agent will just like go and do a bunch of work on your behalf. Sometimes it'll just complete the work. Sometimes it'll come back to you and say like, hey, I've got some questions, or I ran into this thing. I need sort of like payment credentials because you said go do this thing and it's actually going to cost $20 in order to do this. Like, can I go ahead and do that? So it's really, really an interesting way to sort of democratize access to this like always on agent that's sort of doing things on your behalf and just running in the background without the friction of like there's no setup. You just like your Google account's already connected
Right.
and such. So I think just trying to make that experience much less frictionful is sort of the North Star, I think, for Spark. And it's been cool to see actually there's a sort of internal variant of this inside of Google that was sort of like, viral inside of Google, and like lots of folks using it to sort of do a bunch of cool stuff that inspired, again, a lot of the ways that this product experience has actually come to life.
This
Yeah,
is and I'll turn it over to Jane for the last thing because I know we're coming up on time. Jane, I'll just sort of like squeeze in my last thing here. So Logan, when you're sort of imagining when people obviously when Spark is kind of coming out this summer, the moment that people would sort of like use Spark, can you sort of like give us a sense of like their because I love, if you can sort of see the screen, you can move from like chat to Spark, things like this. I think some people like are still and by the way, I agree with you on OpenClaw. I did it because I wanted to feel like what does this feel like? It's not something I'm like recommending to people. But like this is where I think everybody wants, right? They want to sort of like just feel it, but people are like, well, I already have like a chat bot. Can you just give kind of like one example of like when is Spark coming into the picture as opposed to sort of like when people were using chatbots? And then I'll give it over to Jane to close this out.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing is like when you don't need an answer right then. If you're like, hey, go do this thing, and like, it's not urgent, I'll come back to it. Like, actually, maybe it'll also, I want it to take time. I want it to sort of like go do a little bit of diligence versus like, give me the answer right now. I'm like trying to make, I'm at the store buying flour, and like I need to know, should I buy bread flour or almond flour or whatever, and like you need to make the decision right there. That's the biggest difference in my mind, is sort of like this asynchronous behind the scenes, maybe it'll come back to you in a couple hours, maybe 10 minutes, something like that, versus like, the AI mode slash Gemini chat-esque question, which is like, give me the answer right now.
Got it.
Okay. Love that. I know we got to wrap up, but I do have one more question. And I will just say, Logan, I love what you said about Spark, because when I tried to set up OpenClaw, it was a very painful experience. I'm not a developer by any means. And all of a sudden I got a little pop-up notification on Twitter that was like, Claude just launches Claude Cowork. And I said, perfect, closed down OpenClaw, went over to Claude Cowork, and I have been using that since. So if Gemini Spark is a simpler, more integrated way to do this, massive user adoption. There's a big percentage of the population that are going to love this. My one question though, because using something like Cowork has been amazing for me as a non-developer, I heard that Project Mariner got canceled, but maybe rolled into something. Can you just tell us the future of like where Google's at with like the computer use thing? I'm super excited about that project, but I was bummed when that got canceled, but maybe it's going to be brought back somewhere else. Can you just tell people about that?
Yeah, I think the thing that's happened with Project Mariner and computer use is that it really is like a capability that you want as part of a bunch of other stuff. So I think you will see sort of the core primitives of computer use. I think that will actually be something that's really important, potentially through Spark, potentially through other services as well. We're working on bringing this to developers as well who want sort of computer use. So I think that will 100% exist. I think it's a core primitive of how we'll interact with the internet, is sort of agents wielding computers and actually controlling UIs on your behalf. So I think there's either already been some updates and comments about sort of the future direction, or those will happen soon. But it's exact. I'm with you. I actually used Mariner all the time. I thought it was a pretty solid project. So I'm excited to see it permeate into even more places.
Amazing. Okay, Logan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You shared so much incredible value. To all of the listeners, make sure to go follow Logan on X and on LinkedIn. I mean, I was basically quoting his LinkedIn the entire time. That's where I get all of my Google news, is from your LinkedIn account.
100%.
So I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to rate and review the podcast wherever you get it. And we will catch you guys all in the next episode.